Welcome back, everyone. Let's begin this brief overview of divorce and remarriage in Islam by looking at the Torah, a book that the Quran says it affirms over and over and over and over again, such as in this verse. How will they make you, presumably referring to Muhammad, their judge when they have the Torah containing the judgment of God, and then turn away after that? Those people are not with the believers. According to the Quran, those who do not follow the Torah, the judgment of God, which they have in their possession, are unbelievers. That is, of course, one example among many verses in the Quran that demonstrably contradict the Muslim narrative about biblical corruption. The Quran says, you have the Torah, the judgment of God, follow it, or you're an unbeliever. But the author of the Quran struggled with the problem of ignorance and ended up resolutely endorsing a book that he did not agree with or understand. Turning to the Torah in Deuteronomy 24, Allah describes a divorced woman who then goes and marries another man. If she divorces him, she may not go back to the first husband. It's important to keep in mind that the Torah frequently does not legislate divine design. Rather, the Torah is legislation for a fallen world. This is made very clear in Jesus' exegesis in Matthew 19. Laws like Deuteronomy 24 were given because of the hardness of the human heart. To see the divine design, we go back to the beginning, where a man leaves his father and mother and holds fast to his wife. The two become one. Turning now to the religion of Islam, we expect complete agreement with the Torah, since the Quran endorsed the Torah, calling it the judgment of God, and calling people unbelievers for not following its instruction. Jewish scholar Jeffrey Teague notes, interestingly, Islamic law prescribes the opposite procedure. If a man has irrevocably divorced his wife, he may not remarry her unless she has been married in the interim. When a couple wishes to reunite, a beggar is hired to marry the woman and consort with her for one night, after which he divorces her and frees her to reunite with her husband. Wives, understandably, find this repulsive, and some Muslims permit a sacrifice to be offered in place of the intervening marriage. The Quran passage in question, of course, comes from Surah 2. If he divorces her, she is not permitted to him to marry after that until she marries another husband. Therefore, according to most jurists, the intervening marriage needs to have been consummated for the original couple to remarry, which at a minimum means that the head of his fully enters her. The threefold divorce refers again to Surah 2 in the Quran, which allows divorce to be pronounced twice before making the divorce final. But note that it doesn't take 3 pronouncements for Muslim men to send their wives away. It can be less than 3, but if you take them back, then you just keep a running count of the number of times you've pronounced the divorce. When a husband takes a wife back, she returns with whatever number remains to complete a threefold divorce. If, for example, he has said it twice, then she only has one time left. Unbelievable. It's like baseball. A batter can swing and miss. Strike one. She can step out of the batter's box, take some warm-up swings, refocus, and step back in, but the count continues. She still has one strike, and she can only have 3. Now, to see how this plays out in real life, we turn to the corpus of literature, which has become an endless source of embarrassment for Muslims in recent decades. You guessed it, I'm talking about the Hadith. Many of you are familiar with this report in which a woman had been divorced and then married another husband who had beaten her until she had visible bruising. Muhammad prohibited her from divorcing her abusive husband and remarrying her first husband until she had sexual intercourse with the man who was beating her. Notice that the abusive husband's behavior is directly in line with the Quran, which allows husbands to beat their disobedient wives, and in line with Muhammad's statements that place husbands in the role of judge and jury. Muhammad said, "A man should not be asked why he beat his wife. Not only is the husband judge and jury, there's no court of appeals." So even though the husband was physically abusive, striking his wife in accordance with sacred Islamic law, Muhammad said that the wife still had to have intercourse with him before she could divorce him and return to her prior husband. And it only makes sense that intercourse with one's abuser would be completely enjoyable and consensual, not coerced at all, right? Isn't Muhammad wonderful? I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. Now, this verse about consummating the marriage with a second husband before being allowed to return to the first one creates an additional problem that Allah would not have had if he did, in fact, confirm the Torah, which he claimed to confirm. If consummating a marriage is required before legal divorce, then a woman could simply sleep with a man one night, then divorce him and go back to the first husband. Good deal for the man, if you're into that kind of thing. This is what Tige was referring to earlier, saying wives understandably find this repulsive. This is what's sometimes called a tahlil marriage, a marriage made only with the intent of sleeping with a woman so she can go back to her first husband. There's a lot in the Islamic literature that condemns those who found this loophole in Allah's law, including Muhammad, who cursed anyone who practiced it. This makes an allegation in a letter attributed to a 10th century bishop named Arathis much more interesting. In Arathis' letter to the bishop of Damascus, Muhammad informs his friend that his wife has committed adultery. Although his friend wants to kill the woman, Muhammad instructs him to divorce her so that another man might marry her and restore her purity. After his friend divorces his wife, Muhammad defiled her and satisfied his desires, and then instructed his friend to remarry the woman. Here, Muhammad himself serves as the muhalil, in other words, the second husband who sleeps with a woman to make her legal for the first husband to marry again. Muslims would naturally want to resist such an accusation, but given the sexual privileges that Muhammad afforded himself that we see in the Hadith and in Muslim commentaries, there's no moral reason to deny Muhammad would do such a thing. Quite the opposite. Whether or not this accusation is historical, it certainly fits Muhammad's moral profile. It's impossible for Muslims to claim the moral high ground for their prophet when their religion utterly incoherently requires a woman to sleep with a man in order to go back to her first husband, even if that man is an abuser. I mean, disciplining his wife by striking her in accordance with sacred Islamic law. In this brief look at marriage and divorce in Islam, we've seen that the Quran once again contradicts books it claims to affirm, demonstrating the ignorance of the Quran's authors. Not only does the Quran contradict the Torah, but it is unaware of marriage laws within the whole context of the Torah, something Jesus makes clear in the Gospels, demonstrating a deeper level of ignorance of the Quran's authors. Islamic law requires a divorced woman to fully consummate a second marriage before returning to the first marriage. This is true even if the woman is being physically abused by her second husband. Divorce pronouncements are like baseball. Women get up to 3 strikes before they're out. Stepping out of the batter's box doesn't reset the count. A 10th century polemical source accuses Muhammad of sleeping with a woman so that she could go back and marry her first husband, something no Muslim could discount based on Muhammad's morality and sexual privileges, clearly seen in the Islamic sources. I hope you enjoyed this brief look at marriage and divorce in Islam and more fully appreciate the beauty and perfection of this religion and its prophet. Everywhere you look, it's a disaster. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.